Welcome to The Other Side of Yesterday, a podcast where we explore the stories of redemption, faith, and hope. Here, we dive into deep moments that define us, the questions that haunt us, and the God who transforms us. Everyone has a yesterday. Let's hear the other side. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is your host, Dustin Wooten, and thank you for tuning in to The Other Side of Yesterday, where we get to tell people stories, what God has done in our lives and taken us from and through. We have a very special guest today, a dear friend of mine, Brother Robert Torres.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, if you'll just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your family, and all those kind of things.
Sure. Originally, I'm from San Jose, California. I grew up there, and it's where my mom and dad parents are from also. And, of course, my grandparents are from elsewhere. But, yeah.
So, California, how was it growing up in that area?
Growing up with, so it was fun because it was the 80s, but, yeah, definitely rough. So growing up, I was, involved in gangs and, of course, drugs. And so I had a little bit of a rough upbringing on top of a little bit of homelessness. So,
Wow. Before getting into homelessness and all that, was that just because of like the situation of your family, or was that just things kind of going on with you personally?
uh, the situation with family, mainly my mom. Uh, Growing up, we grew up on my mom and my dad were divorced ever since I was born. And I lived with my mom because my mom had custody because my dad was abusive, and so I had visitation rights with my dad, and so because of that separation between my mom and my dad, I live with my mom, and my mom's kind of upbringing or her raising, I should say, was different from the norm, so it made my situation a little bit different.
Sure, sure. And is it just you? Is it you and some siblings?
Oh, so I grew. So since my mom and my dad are split, there's 5 children on my mom's side, to include me, and I'm the second. And
Okay.
then on my dad's side, there's 3 of us, and so I would be the second child as well there.
Oh wow. Okay.
So
And was the experience you had kind of similar to theirs, or did y'all each kind of have your own path y'all were walking?
all of us had different paths, I would say, because we were split.
Oh, okay.
So it's crazy, but I can definitely explain it as we get into the story.
Sure, sure. Let's jump into it then. So, growing up,
All right. So growing up, like I said, my mom and my dad were divorced and were split, and so my sister is the oldest, and my sister and me came from my dad and my mom. And my mom, we went with my mom, and we would visit my dad on the weekends. Well, my mom, growing up with her, she was trying to better herself because she didn't finish high school, and so she was trying to better herself. She went to ITT, I think, technical institution, and became a IT person. And she worked for. So where I'm from in San Jose is considered the Silicon Valley. So there's a lot of
sure.
electrical positions, jobs, and so my mom worked in a company. It was called 3Com at the time, and she would work with testing motherboards, I guess, and stuff like that. So she did have a good education in doing that. We were kind of in a broken home, but my mom met a gentleman, and she was with him for a good amount of time. However, he was an abusive alcoholic,
Oh no.
and my mom had 3 other children with him, so that's why there's 5 of us on my mom's side. And then when I would visit on my dad's side, my dad had met a. So my dad was an alcoholic, and he was into drugs as well. My mom was into drugs, mainly marijuana. And my dad, he met a lady who was very, very nice. I never really considered her my stepmom. I just called her by her first name. And she came into the relationship with my dad with one boy, which is my
Okay.
brother. And then my dad and her ended up having a daughter, which is my other sister. So you have on my dad's side, you have, my older sister and me, and then you have my brother and my sister. And then on my mom's side, you have my older sister and me, and then the three other children, which is a brother and two sisters.
Wow. And on either side where was God or church or any of that?
So, as growing up was rough. If you know anything about San Jose, it's broken into four sides, and north, east, southwest. And I grew up in the east side, which is considered the ghetto. And growing up on the east side with my mom, who's a single parent, trying to get her education so she can find a job and provide for us, which was hard at the time. She would work overnights, and so during the day she would
Wow.
sleep and or would try to sleep, and she would send us off to school. So on the weekends, when there was actual a bus that would come and pick us up to take us to church, and my mom would just go, go, so she can get her rest,
Sure.
and we would get on the bus and go to church, that I can remember, or they would tell stories and stuff. I don't really remember it personally,
Okay, okay.
but this was what was relayed to me that was going on. And then so I know my grandmother, she was a pastor's daughter.
Oh,
So
wow.
she's big into church, into praying. And so she would go to church occasionally too. And she would also encourage, my mom and all of us to keep going to church and attending church. So my mom really wasn't the one who would go to church, but she would just tell us to go. And I think it was to help her situation out so she can get some rest and us out of her hair for a few hours and not have to worry about us.
It's so funny because we've done a few of these now, and that's such a common, like, from that era of parents are like, I'm not going to church, but I definitely want my kids going somewhere.
Yeah. I think maybe the church needs to invest in a bus.
Wow. So what was
So
it like with that, and then growing into like teenage years being in that area?
so in the teenage years, I was so through that whole situation, um, we had went away my fifth grade year. And I say went away. We lived in Tracy, California, which is roughly about 45 minutes away from from San Jose, where I was from, and it's just past Manteca, if you're familiar with California.
Okay, okay.
And Tracy, California, I went there my fifth grade year, and so as I said, my mom was with the abusive alcoholic. He would prior to that, when we were in San Jose, we lived right down the street from my grandmother, and he would beat up my mom, and then I remember having to escape, and I say escape because I would jump out the window, and I would run down the street to where my grandma's house was, and then they'd call the cops, because I'd tell them, hey, this dude's beating up mom again. And
Man,
so, the cops come, and back then, domestic violence wasn't a huge thing.
right.
So when the cops would show up, they would just hear both sides of the story, and oh, you guys need to cool out, and then that was the end of it. Or if he was drunk and acting a fool, then they would take him away. And then, of course, he would get on my mom, and my mom would feel bad about it. And, why are you doing this to me? And blah, blah, blah. If you ever been in that situation, in a domestic violence situation, you'll understand where the one abusing makes the other one feel a guilt trip and bad, and you're doing this to me. You're sending me to jail because of what you said, and so they try to manipulate them
Yeah.
into not pressing charges or not coming forward and keeping quiet about the domestic violence and everything. And so, like a week later, he'd be back in the home, and then it would start the same process all over again.
Yeah, and that's why so many people say, "Why didn't you say something?" And for a lot of times, people did say something.
Yes.
People did something, and it's not a lot of these situations are not as cut and dry as to why the abuse continues. Because, like you said, not only is there the physical abuse, but there's the mental and
Yes.
the emotional to keep people under their thumb so that they
Yes.
don't get exposed.
And then another layer to that was because I told you that my mom had 3 children from him. One of them was my little brother at the time. And then so since I was not his, meaning I wasn't of his blood, he would not favor me. He would favor his son over me. So if I made my brother cry, it was my fault and I would get in trouble.
Man.
And so I would get spanked. And so, being children, we tend up and to make things up. And so my brother would cry on purpose just because like I wouldn't let him play with my toys.
Right.
Because my dad would get me toys and then they were my toys and I would want to keep them in pristine condition as much as I could or so that they wouldn't be broken or anything. And then I wouldn't allow him to play with them because I didn't want him to break them. He would cry, and then he would be given that toy, and then he would go and break it on purpose
Oh,
because I wouldn't let him play with it.
right, right.
And so going through all that, there's a lot of trauma to unpack. But so 5th grade, we move away. My mom thinks it's a great idea to get away from everybody, I guess, since she got tired of me running down the street to my grandma's and calling the cops on this guy. So we go, and for my 5th grade year, we go to Tracy, California. We're there. After that year is up, though, my mom finally got the courage to fight and stop the domestic violence and this domestic dispute. And so she made it to leave him. She finally got the courage to leave him. His caveat was, "You're not taking my kids from me." So my mom could only grab me and my older sister, and my grandfather helped in that aspect, and we moved back to San Jose. And then him, my brother and 2 sisters, they moved to an area called Lake Comanche, which is out past Lodi, if you're familiar with California. And they lived in that area, Burson, Valley Spring area, and that's where they grew up. And so from then on, it was, so I'm going into my 6th grade.
Wow.
It was almost like I had to find a place to stay and live. So I went with my grandmother and my grandfather, Ronnie and Vic. And I was there for the summer. And then after the summer, my uncle came to live with my grandma. Well, my grandpa Vic didn't like it, but my grandma was like, we don't have room. We only have room for my uncle. So essentially I was kicked out of the home. So my mom was out working at the time and trying to get spare money as she could, but she was also partying at the same time.
Sure.
So, and as I said, my mom was into marijuana, so she was, doing marijuana and drinking a lot. She would go to bars, meet gentlemen, and trying to work and everything. And she talked with my grandfather, Ruben. And so at my 6th grade, I went to go live with my grandfather, Ruben. Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right.
My grandfather, Ruben, he was a great guy. He worked for NASA, he worked for Lockheed Martin.
Okay.
Which in turn worked for NASA.
Right.
And he got to work on satellites. He got to work on the Hubble telescope.
Wow.
And he got to work on some of the space shuttles, like the Challenger and stuff like that. He was an engineer. And he would go on top secret missions. So when I was living there with him in his home, he would go on like top secret missions. He'd be like, "Hey, I'm going to Houston. I'll be there for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and I'll be back." And essentially, I was left on my own.
Oh, man.
And he would make sure that I had food in the house, but it was just me. And I would have to make sure I got up and went to school. and came home and then made sure, the doors were locked and I was in the home on time and everything. So essentially I grew up
As a sixth grader.
as a sixth grader.
Wow.
And this lasted until my 10th grade.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And I had just got done with freshman, ninth grade. And in that summer, my grandfather passed away.
Hmm.
So I started the 10th grade there, still living on the east side of San Jose. And living in the east side of San Jose, I grew up in gangs. And so I was jumped into a few gangs. So I was living in my grandfather's home again, empty after he had passed, and
Goodness.
it was left to my aunt to decide everything. And my grandfather had 5 children, which included my mom. And my grandfather put in his will that if anybody argued about the decisions that what my aunt was making about, she was supposed to sell everything and then disperse the money equally amongst the 5 children. However, my grandfather's clause was that if anybody argued with my aunt, all she had to do was give them $1, and they were excluded from any other monetaries whatsoever.
Wow.
So, I know my grandfather had the house that we were living in. He had 2 vehicles. One was a truck, and one was a 280ZX. It was like an 85, I think, maybe 83 280ZX, and he was proud of it.
Sure.
That was like his
Sure.
little sports car. And so essentially, I grew up with my grandfather those years that I was there with him from the 6th to the 9th grade. And my grandfather would go out and he would. So when I say I grew up by myself, is because my grandfather would leave. He would go on his trips for work.
Right. Right.
And then like Friday nights, he would go out and he's like, all right, I'm going to. He would go to Club Serape. So if you're from San Jose, you would know Club Serape. My grandfather would be there, and he would go and meet young ladies himself. And then sometimes, he would be dating and they would stay at the house for a little while and then they would leave and then it'd be a new person. And so I met several of his ladies, and towards the end, he had married one of the ladies. And unfortunately, she took some of his funding because,
Sure.
so they were married, but they were going through a divorce because they were separated. But because he passed away while they were still married, she got some of his income that from his job. And I know he had like insurance, and then of course he had some savings, and I think the house at the time got sold for somewhere around 300,000. And then my aunt, like I said, the 2 cars, my aunt said she sold it for $5,000, just so people would not argue about how much she got. But apparently she just said, yeah, I sold both cars for 5,000.
Oh my
Which
goodness.
in the 90s, yeah, that might have been a lot of money, but for the 2 cars, that was not worth it. I think
Southern California too. I mean, that even in the '90s, it was already going up, and everything was in high in prices. There.
yeah. So she could have got 5,000 easy for one of the cars, not both. But so at the end of the day, my aunt owned essentially the house that I stayed in.
Right.
And so I stayed remaining going to school. And then halfway through, I want to say maybe the first semester, my aunt was like, okay, well, we need to sell the house, so we need to start showing it, so you need to move out because we can't have you here in the house when we're trying to show it. So I'm like, well, where am I supposed to go?
Yeah.
And she's like, that's not my problem.
Oh man.
So Essentially, I was homeless. I had places to go. Don't get me wrong, but they weren't my top priority. And then as a 14, 15-year old who was essentially parentless and I did whatever I wanted, I went whenever I wanted. My grandfather didn't really mind as long as I told him, like, hey, Grandpa, I'm going to be over here. I'll be home at this time. And he was fine. I really didn't stay out late unless it was a school dance.
Okay. Yeah.
But they were usually on Friday nights, which
Well, he's gone anyway.
my grandfather's got at the club and doesn't come home till 2 in the morning. So I knew my curfew was 2 in the morning.
Right.
So I remember, like, after the school dances, everybody would go to the local pizza place. And so I would scrounge up money, obviously to buy tickets to go to the dance, but to save afterwards, because afterwards we go to the pizza place and then everybody would be having fun at the pizza place, socializing. And then afterwards, I remember sometimes they'd be a small group of us, walking home at like dark 30 in the morning, worrying about taps because we didn't want the cops to pick us up because it's so late in the 1 o'clock in the morning, and we're a 15-year-old walking home.
Right.
And we're talking like I'm not walking like down the street home. We're talking I'm walking probably 5, 6, 7 miles to get home.
Wow.
And it's pitch black, and sometimes there was a group going my way, sometimes there wasn't. I was alone walking the street. And sometimes it's like, hey, are you going this way? I'll go with you. And then you go to a certain point until they get dropped off, and then I'm living the furthest, so I've got to go out further. And luckily nothing really bad happened to me walking home alone at night at 1 o'clock in the morning. I remember one time, I just gotten home and I put the key in the doorway to unlock the door, and I see a car coming down the road, and I'm like, oh, so I'm hurrying up, getting in the door in the house, and I shut it and lock it, and sure enough, the car pulls up the driveway, and so I go run upstairs, and I jump into my bed. And because I lived upstairs, and my grandfather, when he would come home from the club, he would always go upstairs to check to make sure that I was there. And sure enough, he walked up the stairs, opened the door, make sure I was there, and then he went back downstairs and went to sleep. And that was one adventure that I remember. I made it home in time.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So after that, essentially, I really had nowhere to go. My mom so back then when my mom was split, and I know I'm kind of backtracking. I'm kind of all over here.
It's all right.
So when it was me, my mom, my sister that left Tracy. So at that time, I had gotten dropped off at my dad's first.
Okay.
Okay. And my sister went to go stay with my aunt because my cousins were about the same age, and my sister and my cousins hung out and would go cruising and would go do stuff together, go to the club, whatever. So essentially my sister went to go live with my aunt, and then before I went to my grandmother's, I got dropped off at my dad's, and I was told I'm just there to visit him. So I was there visiting with my dad, and my dad, I guess he had more information than I did, and he knew that we had left Tracy and that we didn't have a home. I didn't have a place to stay. So we were at dinner, and we sat down to eat, and he was trying to talk to me, and he was saying, well, you're going to be living with me, so you got to live by my rules. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Because since when?
Yeah, ever since I was little, my mom and dad been separated, and every other weekend we would go visit my dad. And so it was always like every other weekend, go spend time with my dad. And my dad was very nice. He would take us places. And like for instance, Santa Cruz, if you're from San Jose, you know what Santa Cruz is. It's a beach boardwalk. And he would take us there every Sunday. I remember not something nice about my dad is he would take us every Sunday to the beach, and we may not have rode the rides or anything, but we're at a beach
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we'd hang out and have a great time. And so we're sitting, we're having dinner. My dad says, "Hey, you're living with me." And I'm like, this is news to me. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not, I'm visiting. I'm not here living with you. And he gets all upset and he gets excited and he says, well, if you're not living with me, get the F out of my house.
Oh my
Get out
gosh.
now. And this is about when I was 12. No, 10. I was 10. I
Wow.
just gotten out of 5th grade. I was 10. And my dad tells me this. And so I was crying, and I didn't know how to get a hold of my mom because my mom was out on her own.
Right.
And there was no cell phones at the time.
Right.
At the time, we did have pagers, but we didn't physically have one, so it wasn't like I could page my mom. So, and my mom and my dad did not talk, and that was another reason why I kind of got to do what I want, because later on I would use them as an excuse, but I'll explain that later on. So at this time, I'm 10. My dad tells me to get out of his house. So I'm like, well, I can't call my mom. I'm gonna call my grandma. And so I call my grandma Vic, and my grandma Vic picked me up on the corner because my dad lives 2 houses from the corner, and my dad told me to grab my stuff and get out of his house. So whatever belongings that I had, I grabbed. I went to the corner and waited for my grandmother to pick me up. My grandma was like, "We'll be right there." So my grandma and Vic picked me up. I stayed with them for the summer, like I said. My uncle came to live with them, kicked me out, and then I'm living with my grandfather. My grandfather passed away. During this whole time, I did not talk to my dad. Um, we never really had a great relationship, but after that, it was definitely ruined. And
Yeah. When you're
there was no reason to really talk to him if he kicked me out of his house, and I'm
when
10,
you're
have
10.
nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so we're at to the point where I'm kind of homeless, and I'm thinking, where can I go? So during this time, my mom, she stayed with friends. She kind of got a job. She found her way, somewhat, sort of. When my grandfather passed away, though, it devastated her. And so she stopped working. And I believe she had an apartment at the time. And I think my sister went to go live with her because, she was living with my aunt, my cousins, and then that didn't work out. And then, honestly, I lost track of her because we're kind of separated. So I don't know whereabouts happened to her.
And it's not like today where it's like, I can look her up on the internet or find her on Facebook.
Yeah, or let me call her up on her cell phone. Yeah,
like that's not a thing.
Yeah. So, and I'm pretty sure she has her own story to talk and tell
Sure.
tell for. But we were separated, and so I got a hold of my mom, and my mom's like, well, I have a place over here. You can kind of stay with me. And so I'm like, okay. So and she lives in Santa Clara, so I moved to Santa Clara. So I'm staying with her for a while, but she still has that lifestyle. She's depressed, and of course, she's using several different coping methods, but she still uses marijuana, and she's still drinking and going out and partying and bringing home different dudes. And so, I was going to high school, and I started going to Santa Clara High. And while I was there, is where I met my girlfriend at the time, who I actually had my first son with. So she was going to youth group, and invited me to go to youth group with her. And so, she was my girlfriend at the time, and I was like, yeah, I want to spend time with you. Sure, I'll go to youth group with you.
This is how most boys end up in youth group, by the way.
That doesn't surprise me. Thankful for, definitely women who invite their significant others to church.
That tends to be the biggest lure to the church for most men.
So we were going to youth group, And I don't remember what night it was, but so I was, going to high school with her, um, and going to youth group with her, and we were together for about 3.5 years. Of we constantly went to church, and like I said, we ended up. I was in high school, and yeah, she was pregnant in high school, and I remember. So it was my senior year, and I would go to class, and since she was pregnant, I would take her books and take her stuff to her class, and then I would go to class.
Mm.
And so it was my senior year, and I remember doing this, and then I was late for my first period. And the teacher at the time, I guess, didn't really care, didn't understand, or didn't even want to hear my side of the story. Probably because, in that time, I was still in the gangs.
Sure.
And the way I dressed was, the normal. I was a cholo, as they
Mm.
say in California. So I had the Ben Dickies pants and everything. And when I went to school, I presented myself that way, and I imagine I wasn't really a troublemaker, but I would not let anybody give me any pushback. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah, yeah,
mean?
yeah.
I
No one's
wouldn't.
gonna mess with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I wasn't
like
gonna let anybody mess with me.
right.
So, um,
And for a teacher, good, bad, or indifferent, I'm sure he looked at you and said, "I know everything I need to know already."
exactly. He already profiled me,
Right. Right.
and he's like, here's this guy shows up late to my class, doesn't whatever, and yeah. So when I showed up late, he goes, look, if you're late again tomorrow, don't even bother showing up to my class, because I guarantee you're not gonna pass. So I was like, okay. Next day I was late because I was taking my girlfriend's books at the time, because she was, 6, 7, 8 months pregnant.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, she's not gonna be carrying all this stuff, a baby, and then all these heavy books to class. So I was doing it for her, and going to class, and he didn't stop to ask. So I was like, I guess I'm not going to that class then. So that freed up my first period in my eyes.
Yeah, yeah. It's one less thing I got to worry about.
Exactly. So going to high school, and having a child on the way is definitely has its challenges, and then being so young and have a child too, is definitely, it's hard, it's rough. I was 18. So let me back up. My birthday's in November. I turned 18. My son is born in January.
Wow.
So
So you were barely 18.
I was barely 18, still in high school, haven't graduated yet. And then, of course, my girlfriend at the time, she is 15.
Oh,
She turned 16 in March.
okay.
So technically, she was 15 when she had my son, my oldest son, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure, sure.
Or she got pregnant when she was 15, and maybe she was 16. I don't remember, but from what I remember, she was young. She was young to begin with. Anyhow, she was 2 grades younger than me, though. So when I was a senior, she was a sophomore.
Mhm.
So I did what I could to help her in high school. Once we had my son in January, I stopped really caring about school so much,
Sure.
because I had a child now that I had to help support.
A whole different responsibility
Yes.
just happened.
Yes. And so because of that, I left the home then. And I was like, okay, it's not conducive for me to be in this environment. So I actually went to go live with my girlfriend and her mom. And I started doing that because I started working, because I had to provide for diapers, formula, wipies, all this
Yeah.
stuff. And so I would go to high school. I'd wake up, let's say I start my day at 6 in the morning. I'd go to school, and then at the end of school, we'll say it's around 3:30. I'd go to work. So say I started at 4:30. I would work until about midnight. Maybe a little bit less, but somewhere around midnight is where I'd stop working, and I'd have to either bus or walk, depending on how I'd catch a ride to get back home. So I would get to her home probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, and then go to bed and wake up at 6 o'clock, having to do this all over again. But then keep in mind, during that time, since I was not around helping taking care of the baby, she would want me to get up in the middle of the night
And help with the baby.
and help with the baby.
Oh man.
So it was pretty taxing and pretty rough. Not to mention, so I was tasked with buying formula, buying food, buying diapers, wipies, and stuff like that. Well, now her mom wanted to start charging me, because I guess her expenses have gone up a little because I'm residing there.
Right.
I didn't feel that way because I was like, I'm only here for like 5 or 6 hours at a time,
Sleep for most of it.
and I'm asleep for most of it. And then, like, if I ask you to buy me something, it's gonna be milk and cereal. Because when I wake up in the morning, I'm eating milk and cereal, and I'm out the door, and I don't come back till 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't eat anything at that time, or if I did, it was milk and cereal, and then I'm off to bed.
Wow.
So she was trying to charge me for electricity, trying to charge me for groceries, and I'm like, I'm not even here half the time. What are you talking about? And then, like, on the weekends when I was off, I would leave because I really didn't want to be in that situation. And so I, make up excuses. Oh, I got to work, or oh, I got to go out, or oh, I'm going to visit my dad. So, like, nobody really was accountable of me, or really looked out for me, because I would present those excuses. Like, if my mom was looking for me, I'd be like, hey, I'm going to be at my dad's this weekend. My mom didn't talk to my dad, so she wouldn't call him. There was no way of getting hold of me until Sunday. So essentially Friday, I did what I want. So as long as, hey, mom, I'll be at my dad's. All right, cool. Leave Friday, and I'm gone all week. It didn't, because nobody checked in on me. There wasn't that accountability.
Right.
And so, growing up and I having a child, I needed money. Sometimes I would do stuff that I was not proud of now, but at the time I saw it as a necessity to try to get by, or to try to, like, put food on my son's table, buy some formula. And luckily I was able to I did not graduate, if you didn't figure that out.
Sure.
My senior year was pretty taxing, and unfortunately, I went to school with my cousin, and my cousin got to walk the stage in 1994, and I did not, because I didn't have enough credits to graduate, because I kept dropping classes left and right, because
Right.
I wasn't going to be there for first period, I wasn't going to be there for second period, because I was just too tired. And then if I had to leave school early, I would just cut so I can go work, because I was like, hey, money is a priority for me right now, because I've got to buy this diapers, formula, XYZ.
And it's not like there was somebody walking with you. You'd be like, okay, so let me get you in a work study program. Let me
Correct.
get you in a program that could help you with your situation.
Correct.
You just had to figure it out.
Correct. And me being a gangster and everything, everybody was really afraid to talk to me because of the negative portrayal of that persona, that person, that profile.
Yeah, and there's just a perception of, even if this kid needs help, I can help him.
Yeah. Or he's just gonna piss it away, or he's probably on drugs or alcohol. He's gonna do whatever. A lot of people make misconceptions just by looking at somebody, and they're like, oh, this guy's whatever. So and I couldn't talk to my dad, because my dad really wasn't around. And my mom was out doing her thing, and so I would living with my girlfriend. That got tiring. I slowly started talking to my dad, And so I went to stay with him for about, I want to say 6 months. And so during all this time, the bus is my transportation. So ever since I was like 11, essentially, the city transit bus was my transportation. You can get a day pass for 75 cents back then. And so you pay 75 cents, you get a pass, and you can use that pass to ride the bus, any bus there is, all day you want. So essentially, every day I had to come up with 75 cents to catch the bus, to taxi me wherever I want.
Right.
So I used to have a backpack that I used to keep with me, and I used to have schedules of all the bus routes that were in the city.
Wow.
So I knew how to get from one place to the next and what time it was going to come. And if it stopped running, all right, now I got to start walking. And so I did that for, the longest time, whether it was the light rail. I would when I lived with my dad, I would take that to downtown. I'd take the light rail over to my job, or I'd take the buses. And so the bus was my number one transportation. So, back then, there was no Uber, so you
Right,
couldn't
right.
call Uber. There was taxis, but
It's not cheap.
they're not cheap back then. And like 75 cents, and I can essentially, in my mind, I can go anywhere. That's not bad at all. And so sometimes to get money, what I would do was I'd ask people like, hey, back then payphones
Right,
were
right.
back then. And it was 20 cents to make a call. And then later they raised it to a quarter and then 35 cents eventually. But back then I'd be like, hey, I got to call my mom, but I'm out of money. Do you think you can spare a quarter so I can call my mom? And, of course people were like, oh yeah, here, let me help you out. Here's a quarter. Oh, thank you. And then I would fake use the phone, keep the quarter. So if I did that 3 times, I had my 75 cents. I go anywhere I
Wow.
want now.
Right, right.
So there was little tips and tricks that I would do. I do that, or so I was at school. I was on a lunch program, and they would give you a ticket for your lunch, and with that ticket, allowed you to grab a lunch meal. And so people would buy those tickets though, and so I would sell those for money, and then now I got cash. So with the cash for lunch, I remember I would eat the mother's chocolate chip grandmother cookies.
Yeah.
They came two in a bag, and they were 50 cents, and then I would get a Coke, and that was 50 cents at the time. So that was $1. So that was essentially my lunch, which is crazy when you think about it. Sugar on top of sugar.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of so and you can probably understand why back then I was like 115 pounds.
Yeah.
Well, not even 115. I was like 105 pounds, really, realistically. And now, if you can imagine, I'm 5'7" at 105 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
And part of it was because, like I said, I would like for lunch I would have cookies and a Coke.
Right, right. And cereal and milk.
Cereal and milk later on. Yeah, I mean that was my whole pretty much diet right there, and I really wouldn't have any of the other like Taco Bell or luxuries or anything unless somebody bought it for me or I was eating over someone's house or something.
Right.
So that was how I kind of hustled. I grew up. When I needed money. Yes, I did have some jobs that would help provide some money. So that was how I learned how to finance real early because I knew, okay, I've got to save this money if I wanted new clothes for school.
Right.
I need to save this money because I need to ride the bus. I need to save this money if I want to eat. I need to save this money if I want to do whatever I want to, go to the dance or, do this, do that. And then, of course, everything else I would steal. I'm not going to lie. I would steal. If I wanted it, I would take it. Okay, this looks delicious. I'm going to take that. Oh, those look nice over there. I want that. I'm going to take it. And I was pretty good at palming stuff and hiding it. So, yeah, like I said, I did a lot of bad stuff. I did stuff to get by. And growing up, there wasn't so much. I knew about God, but obviously I wasn't walking with Christ in
Sure.
no form or shape, fashion, because I was constantly sinning every day and
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
repenting for nothing. And I had this attitude where, well, if I want it, I'm just gonna take it.
right.
And which is not a good attitude to have if you're a godly person or if you're
Right.
trying to be Christ-like.
Yeah, it tends to be the opposite of most of the things Jesus taught us.
Yes.
Like like you said, like when you're walking to survive, that's what you do. You
Yes.
do what it takes to survive,
Yeah.
and obviously that doesn't make it okay. But it's on the other side of it. It's easy, at least for me. It's like, well, this is you can have mercy on somebody or grace. It's like, look, people did they? We all know better. Like we all know it's wrong.
Yep.
But then the other side of it is, yeah, but what was my alternative?
Right.
Right?
And,
Like,
and part of that too is understanding the why. Why are they
yeah,
doing that? And if you can understand somebody's why, you might be able to help them.
exactly. And I think it helps see people as humans instead of going like you were saying, like, oh man, that's a druggie, that's a gangbanger,
Yeah.
that's a this, that's a that. Well, you can start to see people as human. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't excuse the things, but it
Right.
does help you be able to figure out like how do I talk to them, how do I minister to them, because they are a person,
Yes.
with a story.
Yes.
So when did things start to really change for you?
So, like I said, I was tired of. So I was living with my girlfriend. I was tired of that. I went to go live with my dad. I could not live with my dad. He was so. Me and my brother shared a room together, and our biggest running joke was my dad is not happy unless he's complaining. So he would constantly complain. And so after 6 months, I was tired. I was like, okay, I can't take this. I got to go somewhere else. So my girlfriend's grandmother at the time, she took me in and she said, hey, she lived at her home alone, and I think she had like a 3-bedroom house, and she worked. And she knew I was going through high school and I was working, and I was trying to help my son out and everything. And so she said, so I had already signed up in the delayed enlistment program to go into the Air Force. And so she said, you can stay here as long as you can until you leave to go to the Air Force. So she didn't charge me rent. And as always, I had milk and cereal, so I hardly ate there.
Right, right.
I didn't really want to be a burden to anybody, and I didn't want to feel like I was taking advantage of everybody. And at the time, I felt like I was my own man, and I can, if I was hungry, I can feed myself, and
Right.
even if it was a little. So through her kindness, I got a place to stay, and I would even have meals with her sometimes. She was a very, very nice lady. But during that time, so I knew I was gonna go into the military. So I was like, I'm gonna go into the Air Force, and this will be good for me and my son. And at the time, I was thinking my girlfriend too. And for us as a family, it would be good for the military to help me out because of the benefits, the pay, the steady job, and this and this and this and that. So I had made it a determination, so which means I needed to keep up with my education. So I had to go to night school. So now, when school had ended in '94, I kept going to school because I was adult 18. I went to adult education. Shout out to Wilson High School. And I went to Wilson High School and during the summer, and I was like 25 credits short of graduating, which it's 5 credits a class. So essentially, I was 5 classes away from graduating. So I just needed to take them 5 classes. So I would go to night school, and I would go to night school, get my assignment from my teacher, and then be like, hey, she saw my situation too, like, hey, I'm a single, well, not single, but I'm a father, I'm trying to help with my son, and I work, and I'm trying to get my education so I can go into the Air Force. And so she was like, okay. So she was kind enough for me to show up to class, turn in my work. She would review it and then correct it and grade it, and then she would give me my work for the whole week, and then I was able to leave. So I didn't have to stay there for a very long time, which was nice. And then all my stuff, my work that I turned in, I did it, and so it was like I was getting A's.
So you finally had at least somebody care.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my girlfriend's grandma Paula, she helped me out, and she cared enough, to be like, hey, here's a place you can lay your head, and I'm not gonna charge you, and like I said, just up until you can go into the military. So I was like, okay, I have a goal now, and I'm shooting to go into the military and everything. Um, with that, I'm still, keep in mind, I'm still running in gangs and doing what I probably shouldn't be doing. And I get caught up downtown, and I end up catching a charge for carrying a concealed weapon, which only was a knife. It wasn't a gun. I used to carry a knife for protection, but the type of knife that it was illegal.
Mm,
And if I would have known at the time, it technically was an illegal search, but I didn't know at the time,
yeah.
and because I was young, and so I essentially caught a case because in California it's considered a felony for carrying a concealed weapon. So
Whoa.
yes, I'm going up against my first strike at the time, um, and so that weekend I go to jail since my record is actually clean because I've never got caught. Um, I went to jail on a Friday. I stayed there the weekend, and then come Monday, I got to get arraigned into court, and the judge was able to release me on my own bail because I had no priors or anything, and I
Mm.
wasn't considered a flight risk. And yeah, it's a felony, carrying a concealed weapon, but I didn't. There was no immediate threat of me fleeing or anything. So they actually released me on my own. So I missed work on that Monday, but I had to call in, and then so in order for me to go to the military now, because you can't on a felony, I had to go to the judge and ask for leniency and for it to be downgraded to a misdemeanor. And because I told him, hey, I'm in the delayed enlistment program, I'm scheduled to go into the military. I'm working on my education to graduate in time in order to do this. And the judge actually um, seen I had a plan, and he took leniency on me as well.
I mean, that is the grace of God right there.
Yes,
Oh, man.
definitely the grace of God. And so he dropped it to a misdemeanor. I ended up paying $750 in fines and having to do 50 hours of community service. So now, on top of trying to do my schoolwork, trying to do my regular work, I had to do 50 hours of community service as well. And then I had to pay off that $750, which was a huge chunk too, as well.
Yeah.
Um, by the grace of God, I did it all and was able to go into the military, though. And that was my turning point. When I got into the military, I knew that um, when I was out there and had to do what I did to survive, that was out there. Now that I had a steady income, a steady job, benefits, this and this, I didn't need to do any of that other stuff.
So was that immediate transition in, was that, I've known a lot of people who try to leave the lifestyles, and transitioning to the military was not easy.
And by no means.
Yeah, yeah. So was that, but you had the determination to say, hey, I know this is based on my ticket to
Yes.
make it.
Yes. I knew that what I was doing is not sustainable because all my friends were either going to jail or dying. And that's the way it is when you're in a gang.
Yeah.
There's no success story of a successful gangster out there who's living the high life and living their best life, doing what they're doing, and living.
Yeah, yeah, that's the damage. Like a lot of, especially in the '90s, right? The glorification of that lifestyle in the movies, Blood In and Blood Out, and
Yes.
Boys in the Hood, and like there's always that. I'll have a chance to make all this money, and sometimes you do, but that doesn't mean you get to keep the life or a life to
Right.
ever spend it or to make something out of it.
because legally, you're gonna get caught up, or lawfully you're gonna get caught up, or if not, like I said, you go to jail, or you end up in a casket because somebody wants to take over what you got because they're jealous. And so it's definitely not a lifestyle. And I knew, I was smart enough to realize that that's not the way of life that I should be living. And I wanted something better. I was tired of living paycheck to paycheck. I was tired of trying to struggle and put food on the table.
Right.
I was tired of struggling on how can I feed my son. And so I'm definitely grateful for the Air Force for giving me that opportunity. But I definitely struggled to make that happen. And so, like, all things are possible, and especially with God. And if it wasn't for that judge, if it wasn't for that Grandma Paula that helped me out when she seen me as a person,
right,
I wouldn't have gotten the opportunities. And of course, that's all by God's grace.
Yeah, and I think that's the my own experience in life, but for so many is, were it not for the graciousness of some very key people, I never would have made it. I never would have made it.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because it's not people you expect it to be.
Exactly.
Right? Like, there's some people who are like, you should be biologically programmed to do this for me. And then, there's people who do, but then you encounter somebody who just has that heart. And like you said, sees you as a person and sees past all the show, all the stuff that you got to do. And I think when we can do that to other people, that helps not only help them change their life, but I think it helps that person, right? You are tapping into something that really only God can give you.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to The Other Side of Yesterday. If today's story inspired you, share it with somebody who needs a little hope. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of redemption, faith, and transformation. Remember, we all have a past. Through Jesus, we have a future.